Today's guest decided to take a one-year sabbatical from her tax consulting career to go on a food adventure with her partner in 2011. It's been 12 years and she's still on that adventure, serving up great food at the many restaurants she's launched since then. Gauri Devidayal is the co-founder of the Food Matters Group, homes to restaurants and brands like The Table, Mac Street Kitchen, Mac Street Bread Co., Iktara, Mumbai, Misty Delivery and Mac Street Cafe. What made her take a leap of faith into the culinary world with no background in the hospitality industry? Here's Gauri to tell us the whole story and more. So The Table turned 12 years old.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I think
I turned about 20 years older in that same period.
So I have this memory, and we've spoken about it a couple of times, but I had just come back from culinary school, and I think I was about 21, 22. I was 22, and I was just kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. And then Jay actually reached out to me, and I still remember meeting him at like Willingdon or Bombay Gym, one of these clubs. And he came to me, he said, I have this beautiful space in Colaba that I want to open a French bakery in. And can you help? And I was just so new. I had no experience. And I was like, okay, what do you want to do? And he's like, he had a French chef, a visiting chef with him who said, we want to make French bread and do all of this luxury sort of French pastry. And at that point, I was like, I think it's, I don't think I'm fit for it and I want to do my own thing. But The Table was actually supposed to be a French-style bakery. Can you talk to me about that?
So, Pooja, that same French gentleman that you're referring to, he's actually the founder of the San Francisco Baking Institute. Jay had in his previous avatar done the whole telecom setup for the SFBI, and that's how he knew Michelle. But anyway, I think shortly after that meeting, Michelle basically said, you cannot do a bakery in Bombay.
I know.
There is nothing that is viable for a bakery in Bombay, or at least doing, French patisserie or vinoiserie. So that idea got scrapped very quickly after. Jay had this whole dream of like getting Paul to Bombay and, all sorts of things. But yeah, so that is the way it all started. But then it took a slightly different turn.
And no experience in F&B, no experience in restaurants.
I mean, come on, how many of us actually, I've been saying that, but like, I think, okay, you went to like proper culinary school. So in that sense, but I think a lot of us who then started our own businesses didn't have any business experience, right? And I think like, yes, while you had the technical...
I had no business experience.
Exactly. So,
and
I
maybe
think
being a lawyer and a CA would have helped a lot.
I think it did actually. It helped with a few things. But, it's funny. And also, even if you've worked in places, running a business is a whole different ballgame, right? And then doing it in India as well. So even if you've run a business somewhere else in the world, doing it in India or Bombay, in our case, is a whole different ballgame that I don't think anything can really prepare you for. But the interesting thing is that I'm actually so grateful that I had the background that I did, because like you said, that it's been such a boon, because that's the one bit that a lot of people really avoid. And I'm sure you're not one of them.
I am 100% definitely on top of that list, because I was like, I'm a chef. Everyone, what do you do? Oh, I'm a pastry chef. And then you start this business and you're like, okay.
I need to be an accountant and everything else.
Everything,
as well.
customer service and supply chain, logistics, marketing, PR. I was like, I don't understand any of this.
But the thing is that a lot of these other things, which I also had no background in, like marketing, PR, but you sort of learn a little bit, and it's such a evolving space in itself that there's no amount of training that you can have, right? You kind of have to learn. I mean, you've seen like with everything going digital, all of that. Yeah. But I think like accounts and finance and legal sort of...
it's a foundation.
It's like exactly. And it's something that you do, I feel, and I say this to everyone who asks me, like, what's your advice to startup founders?
Oh my God, you took my question away.
And you did not share them with me. I just want to put it on the record. But, you need to do a basic course in accounts, and that sounds like dull as dishwater, but you have to do it.
I mean, that was the biggest lesson takeaway
Yeah.
for me as well. And I think it's still every day I'm learning. Every day I go to work and I'm like, oh, this is how this could have been done in
But
a
I
much
remember
better
you
way.
posted about this as well, and how you
Yeah.
did a basic account.
Yeah.
I think your like investors
Yeah, yeah,
made
yeah.
you do this like
Yeah.
basic course in accounts, and I'm like, see, exactly.
Yeah, you have to. But so what were the initial, like, say, 3-4 years of setting the table up like for you guys?
You know, I want to say this sort of at the outset that when we started 12 years ago, the whole F&B industry and, you know, scenario was very,
Very
different from
different, yeah.
today. I wouldn't necessarily say do it that way
Yeah.
if you were opening something, you know, in 2023.
What were some of the things that you think have changed?
So, first of all, you know, there were fewer restaurants out there, standalone restaurants out there. And I think people were willing to give places a second chance if, you know, they maybe didn't get it the first time. And, you know, they were just sort of, there was no, by the way, no social media.
There was no, yeah.
I remember Instagram. My first post on Instagram was in 2014, which was probably later than most people as well.
I remember being at the table once with
Yeah.
Atish and saying, Gauri, you
I
need to
remember
post.
this. No, and I have to say this. You had 10,000 followers then, and I was like, Pooja, how have you got 10,000 followers? Like, I remember this. I distinctly remember this. It was after Sunday brunch.
Yeah.
And we were sitting there having
And I was
coffee.
like, come on,
Yeah.
post something. Post a picture of this. It's so easy.
Yeah, oh God, now he can't, like, Jay's like, can you get off your phone? But, you know, so it was a very different scenario. And I think people were just more open to coming out, just trying, figuring things out for themselves. And so, you know, that's obviously from a marketing standpoint, but just as an operation as well, we actually only opened for dinner for the first 5 months. And because, you know, we need, like, we wanted to get that bit right before sort of overextending. And our prep kitchen actually was about, you know, 10-15 minute walk away. It wasn't
Yeah.
where it is now, and it wasn't that big, so we really didn't want to you know, go all out till we were getting comfortable. And so we started lunch 5 months later. I mean, we knew why we were sort of staggering the operations, but it sort of, by then, people associated table with only dinner. And so it took us a really long time to establish the fact that you can also come and have lunch. I would say it almost took a year before
Wow.
people started, you know, coming out for lunch. We started Sunday brunch sort of about 3 or 4 months after we started lunch. So that was a different menu. So all these things today, I think it would be challenging to open a restaurant where you don't open.
So tell me, when you started this and you're only doing dinner service and now it's taken a year for people to, so there must have been times where lunch service was dead. How do you at that point deal with it? What do you kind of feel? Do you feel like, oh my God, I've done the wrong thing? How do you kind of go back, and do you feel like you did something differently?
So that was actually one thing that we never felt that, oh, have we done the wrong thing? And also you can't think that because it's too late. You can't turn back time. But I think that, you know, we just had to be very patient. You have to have really, really firm belief in what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you will have those moments of doubt. There's no question about it. But if you really strongly believe in what you're doing, and also the thing is that we were getting great feedback from all the people coming for dinner. So it wasn't that there was something wrong with the food or the concept. It was just that either people didn't know we were open for lunch and we didn't have Instagram. So, you know, getting that word out was obviously a bigger challenge. But then also people said like, oh, it's more of a
Dinner space.
celebratory, indulgent, fine dining thing, like not so much a lunch space.
Casual catch-up.
We tried sort of, you know, having a slightly different menu for lunch, which was more casual, quicker sort of service, quicker food. And it even, you know, till date, the lunch menu is a little different from dinner. But beyond that, it was really a thing of, you know, wait. And I sort of, again, this is something I say, which I don't think has changed, is that when you get into, especially the restaurant business, you know, they say, oh, have 6 months working capital. I would say have like more than a year's worth of working capital, because you'll plan for those 6 months and everything unplanned is what then gets taken care of with that buffer that you keep. So it's something that, yes, you have to be patient.
And so when you started the table, you had Alex, the
Yeah.
chef that was quite the public face of the restaurant. And then, that kind of, at the end of it, he split from the restaurant group and then went and opened his own thing. What was that period like for you?
So interestingly, and I don't know if you remember this, but about 3 years after the table had opened, he actually he went back to New York, and he was working at 11 Madison Park for about a year, and that time, the first time when he went off, was actually the sort of more kind of challenging time for us because. Again, this was nothing to do with Instagram and the sort of media part of it, but just from an operational standpoint, having the confidence that the team could manage. They themselves, having that confidence, not just us. But, it was what it was. And so we said, look, we'll be there to support whatever you need and we believe in you and you can do this. Yeah. And they did do it, right? So it gave us the confidence then when he finally did want to move on. After he came back, he was there for a few more years. And then when he finally wanted to move on, then it wasn't so much the operational challenge that we were concerned with. Then it was just a matter of managing public perception because everyone thinks a restaurant is a one-man show. And, if a chef's gone, then that's the end of it. And it could be true for a lot of restaurants where a chef is probably entirely looking after operations. But I think, we were so involved that, and at that time we only had the table. We didn't have, and we had Mac Street Kitchen, which is a daily operation. So it was pretty much just the table and we were very involved. So I think having that, us as a support system, gave everyone confidence that we can do it. And then it was just a matter of time when people were like, oh, actually, it's fine.
And I feel the same, right? Because we had the Colaba Cafe right next to you guys. And I think before we shut it down in 2020, we had a whole year where our sous chef kind of took over. And initially I was feeling the same things. I was like, oh my God. And I don't, I can make dessert, but I can't really run the savory kitchen. And I had moments of doubt and moments of self-doubt saying like, oh, and I knew that a lot of people came to the cafe for the chef. And I was like, if he's not here, will they still come? Will they still like the food? Will it be different? But it was fine.
And the interesting thing is there are a lot of people who don't have a clue who the chef is.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of this doubt and anxiety is self-imposed.
Self-imposed, exactly.
And I think that's been one of my biggest learnings.
And that's with me for Low 15 as well, right? Because in my head, it's like, oh, I'm the chef at Low 15. A business consultant came to me. She's like, darling, I had no idea who you were. She's like,
reality check. Come down to earth, Pooja.
She's like, I would go to your shop because my parents live next to it and I would walk in because I like the macaroons. But I didn't care who was like making them. I was like, okay, thanks. That makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are like little things. I think when you run a business, you kind of, and there are realizations that come in through the process and the path.
I mean, I've seen how I've evolved as a person and just dealing with stress. I remember when we first opened, there were so many things. Like if one guest said something, that this wasn't good, or I wouldn't sleep for nights.
Would you take it personally? Because that's what I would. I would take it. I would take everything.
And when people
so
said don't take it personally, I was like, what do you mean? It's been my blood, sweat, and tears. Obviously, I'm going to take it personally. But now I realize what they mean when they say don't take it personally, which is that firstly, the fact is that you can't please 100% of, and that's not an excuse or a way of, but it's a reality.
Yeah.
The second thing is shit will happen.
Yeah.
And you have to, and we've talked about this in the past, where people will make mistakes. Your team will make mistakes. Things will get screwed up. And that human sort of aspect of this business is also what brings so much pleasure to this, experience. So you have to recognize that and not be this perfectionist that I was, the auditor, where it's like you cannot make one mistake. And and it's about how you deal with that, not just yourself, but also with your team, where it's like, okay, it's fine, you know?
Has that changed you as a leader as well, and as with your team? Like, what
I think
changes?
so. I think, of course, I still get mad when, the same things happen again and again, the same mistakes. But I also realized that as we grew as a business and, launched other brands, that I can't be everywhere, and I can't, I have to empower the team to take decisions, to, and in getting them to a place where they can do that and they understand what to do, which is not just coming from me as a do this, do that, but them learning for themselves. That's part and parcel of it. So you'll, hopefully it's they're fewer and far between, but you can't grow yourself, or and it's not just about growing other brands. I mean, most of our other brands have happened a lot later in these 12 years, but just as a person, if I want to do something else and that's going to take me away
Delegate
from you have to learn how to do that.
And talking about the other brands, how did that come about? What was that always part of the plan, or?
So firstly, there was no plan ever.
That's very reassuring.
Yeah, let's just put that out there. There's never been a plan, and I think so. After we opened the table, and it's sort of after about 2 or 3 years, everyone was like, okay, open one more, open in Bandra, open in Delhi, open whatever, right? The usual. And we looked at a lot of spaces, didn't sort of nothing. Either there was
Did you want to
issues.
open another table? Was that part of? Would you consider?
I didn't know. I mean, I don't think we knew otherwise, right? Because that was the only brand we had. So we were like, but it was something we were very nervous about, because something worked about this location and this whole sort of space, and it's not easy to replicate that, right? It wasn't a sort of chain format kind of space. So it really had to be the right space. And of course, as you know as well, like Bombay is not exactly easy to find real estate that works, especially for a restaurant. It's expensive, the licensing, all sorts of things, right? So we spend a lot of time looking at spaces, and then because we were spending more time with brokers than I think family or our team. At one point, my dad said, like, hey, I've got this like decrepit like warehouse in the middle of nowhere. Like, you deal with all these brokers, you keep meeting them. Like, can you just ask one of them to like flog this off for me? And that's when Jay was like, why flog it off?
We'll take
we
it.
found space. And
what a beautiful space.
well,
it is.
it wasn't quite that beautiful when we first set eyes on it. And yes, that's what became Magazine Street Kitchen, but it wasn't exactly a space or a location that was conducive to a restaurant. So then we kind of had to rethink what we were going to do. And that space took us 2 years to do. So we opened finally in June 2016. I remember you did the first ever, you were part of the first ever dinner that we did there, which was a charity event. And it was a space, again, everyone told us, you're crazy. No one's ever going to find it or come there.
Everyone found it.
Eventually.
we all trekked there.
I have to tell you something really funny. Yeah. So in the first few months of it, I used to go obviously for every event, and I was taking an Uber once, and, I knew the way. So I directed him because he obviously had no clue where we were going. And then he said, "Idhar kya hai, madam?" Because it was all dark. And I said, I did not explain like a kitchen and sort of that whole concept to him. So I just said, "Idhar restaurant hai." And he said, "Aajkal kahan log restaurant khol dete hain." And I was just like, I don't want your commentary. Just drop me off and go away. Like, like, as it is, I was hearing this from like my family like breathing down my neck, and I was just anyway. So that happened. So like I said, it was kind of accidentally. It wasn't.
So you had table, then we had Mag Street kitchen, and then the bakery came.
So the bakery then, because we now had all this space, we were like,
and that was the original dream.
Yeah. So, it was like, what do we do here? Yeah. And again, the idea was that we were already making a lot of the breads for the restaurant, for the table. So, and we'd always felt that there wasn't a great sort of bakery in the city
Because
doing this
Michelle
kind
said
of.
it's not possible.
There was that as well. That was kind of at the back of our mind. But Alex and Chef Rachel,
Yeah.
they both sort of clearly proved Michelle wrong,
Yeah.
and worked on a great sort of bakery menu. And then because we had space at Mac Street Kitchen, we moved the bakery prep there and started supplying you again. I think one of our
Yes.
first
Yes.
ever bakery clients. So Pooja, you've been with us throughout. But yeah, so that's what we started. And so for a long time, then it was Mac Street Kitchen, Mac Street Bread Co., and The Table.
And then there was Misty.
And then, so 2 years later, this space came up in Colaba. And, of course, when you're looking at doing another restaurant, you don't look in your own backyard because that just seems crazy. But then it's also one of those weird things where when a great location comes up, you're just like, I can't let it go. I'll figure something out. And so again, there was no plan. But we did this, we decided. And so the Woodside boys, Abhishek, Pankaj, Sumit. So more Abhishek, we'd been talking about like, wouldn't it be cool to do
I think
something
this
together?
is the first restaurant that you saw like two, if I wouldn't say competing.
I don't think we were competing, but I think that
everyone else thought so.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't see it as that, but it was definitely, I think, one of the first times the two restaurant groups came together to do something, right? And I think there was a lot of different reasons for that. Partly that we were like, okay, it's just two of us so far, and we've got a lot on our plate already, and it would be nice to have the support. I think one of the reasons you don't see this happen so much is because there's a lot of trust involved, right, with business partners and co-founders, and obviously, hopefully, it's there between two spouses. But bringing in outsiders can it's always tricky, right? So, but there was just never that question in our mind with the three boys, and we, the reason I say that I don't think we were competitors was because it's a very different vibe. It's a very different experience, and that you're catering to.
Yeah.
And we both are patrons of each other's spaces, and we go there at different times for different reasons, right?
Exactly.
So, and we hugely respect what we respectfully do. So I think it felt more like there was a synergy rather than anything else. And because with Misty, the idea was to do, a very bar-centric yet dining space. We felt that, we would be able to bring our strengths to that operation rather than, see it any other way. And so it was always like from a very like, there's no reason not to do this. But of course, that didn't pan out the way we planned.
What were the biggest learnings from that experience for you?
Oh God, loads of them. I think for me, and I don't want to say this as a blanket sort of diktat that this is it. But I do feel that in a restaurant, you tend to need to focus on either the food or the bar. It's we had this whole vision of what we wanted. We wanted this sexy cocktail bar with delicious Vietnamese and Burmese, like Southeast Asian food. And so we had certain rules, like you couldn't, I think under 21 wasn't allowed, or something, some age like 18 maybe, after 7 p.m. And the idea was that, like Jay and I want to go somewhere, or like even the boys felt like we wanted to go somewhere and have a lovely cocktail with someone and not have like kids
Date
around
night.
or whatever. Yeah, like a really nice date night. And I felt like in South Bombay at that time there weren't that many choices for that, and that backfired, honestly, because Bombay is still very much it's a small audience. This was still in the premium dining space, so there is a limited audience for this. And then when you cut out half the family as well, it's a very tricky thing, right? So there was that. I think the food was, we loved, everything that we had tried when we traveled to Vietnam. But when Vietnamese food is very, very pork and meat centric. It's not vegetarian friendly. And I think that again was something that, we maybe didn't take seriously enough when we opened. So I think the menu, and this is what I was referring to when I said right in the beginning that like 12 years ago, people who, when the table opened, and it was a very, it was a new concept for a lot of people, right? Because there wasn't
too many fine. There was no stand. There was hardly any stand.
Well, and also like as a cuisine, they couldn't like pigeonhole it into one type of cuisine. Yeah, it was like I can't say that. I can't get myself to say it. And the whole sharing plates, whatever. So there was enough throwing people off with that, but they were still like open to. With this, it was literally something that, very quickly people either loved it or hated it. It seems there were more people who didn't take to it. And that just, you just can't bring a lot of people back in once you've lost that one shot with them.
And so as a business owner, at what point do you say, okay, we tried this, but it's not working, time to move on?
It's really hard. Yeah. You're just like, acha, give it one more month. Acha, we'll try one more thing. Just like, exactly. And you keep, and then at some point, you're just like, I don't have any money left.
Because it's that hope and you're like, oh, exactly. If I fix one thing,
exactly. And it's really hard. I mean, we went through it, and I could say this, I can definitively say that it is one of the toughest decisions to make. You also have this ego, right? That there was a lot riding on this second restaurant because, and I don't know if this was the perception outside, but for me, I felt like it was very important to me that people didn't think, oh, the table was a one-hit wonder and we couldn't pull this off again. And, then
you're like, oh, I don't want to put this on luck, and this actually I can...
Exactly. And then, but it just wasn't working. And I think I went through my own, like, sort of mental process of understanding that all that no one cares actually. It's in my head.
Yeah.
And even if they do, that's sort of their problem, not mine. But, when you kind of get over those sort of obstacles in your own mind, you can make a sort of clearer decision to say, hey, it's a business. It's not working. Like, either pivot into something different, which is what we decided to do, or close it down or whatever. So you have to be decisive.
Or you'll be pushed against the wall and you'll have to do it anyway. As I had to.
Yeah, I mean, there was, I remember, COVID kind of also was the last nail in the coffin. But I think there was a bunch of things, and that happened with us as well, right?
Did you ever feel, because I know this happens with properties a lot, where everyone is like, this is a bad luck property and anything you start
so there. I have to tell you that so there was a lot of talk about that with because the space is, and in fact, at one point, I learned a lot about Vastu, by the way, in 2020.
What all did you do? Tell me.
No, look, it's that coming back to that thing of hope, that you just try things out. But I've never, and the funny thing is with the table as well, ironically, it's a corner property and they were always the ones that people thought were bad luck, and they never took those spaces. And that's why a lot of the Irani cafes, etc., are in corner properties, because they were like, we'll take it, it's cheap rent, and and today a corner property is like the most sought after thing, right? So yours was a corner property as well, and so I've never really been a big believer in this, and I mean, not to sort of put it down or throw shade on anyone's beliefs,
I feel
but
like
personally,
when things are going wrong and you're trying to fix everything and you're like, maybe there's something that's just beyond my control, and maybe it's like, oh, the property is bad. Like, I mean, because I feel like that's...
I actually remember in your cafe, your mum coming to do a reading. And I was just like, what do you think we should do with the cafe? And she probably thought I was like cuckoo. But no, she lives with good coming around. So, it's literally like you're looking for answers everywhere. And or you're looking for that sort of definitive answer because you probably know something in your heart.
But you turned it around.
Yeah. Well, no, there was a little hiccup before that as well, because we turned it around to a Cantonese concept, which lasted about 5 minutes because then COVID happened. So that was a bummer as well. Like, we opened May 13. 10 days before we closed it.
Oh, God.
And so, and
So what are you feeling at this stage? You're like, okay.
so, that closed obviously because of COVID.
Yeah.
So we didn't take that personally the second time round. But obviously you're like a little bit like, I've just spent a lot of money on doing this or sort of doing this, rebranding it. But at that point there were like bigger problems, honestly. That was one of many problems, right? So we didn't realize the extent of how long it would go on. So we still felt like, hey, maybe it'll resume at some point. But I remember at some point when we realized it wouldn't resume, there was a Vastu consultant involved again. And, he said to someone that we were talking to about doing something there that do not touch this space. And unless you move the entrance to the back and the kitchen in the front. And I was like,
How is
that's
that
not going to
gonna
happen. And then I was also like, hey, Busaba ran like really successfully for I don't know how
Very
many
long.
years. Yeah. So I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. But anyway, like we don't have a choice. We've already spent so much money here. And, we've got another shot. Like the landlords were great with us. So we were just like, look, you've pretty much lost everything. Like, give it one last shot.
Yeah.
And so then we opened Mac Street Cafe in October 21. So, the funny thing is, so this person had said to us that like for 3 months, it'll all be great because, everyone in Bombay comes to check out all the new places. And so till Jan, I was just shitting myself.
You were like,
the whole
now it's going to
time.
happen. Now it's going to happen.
I was it's suddenly just gonna go like downhill from here. And touch wood, touching like all the wood here. It's almost gonna be a year and a half, and we've opened the second one now.
That's
in Lower Rail.
amazing.
Yeah, so yeah. But it's a trippy ride. Look, that's all I can say about this whole thing. And you can't let this consume you to a point where it really brings you down. You have to see this as it's a business. Yes, you'll have stressful days, but when you kind of sit back and look at it, you can't sort of let this define you to a point where it dictates how you feel and all the time. And I think if you can kind of step back and say, I'm still capable of doing lots of things, and yes, there will be ups and downs and all of that, but
You'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'll figure it out, and I think that's what I've learned over the last 12 years.
And I remember when I did your podcast, there was a question that you asked me about personal brand. And you were like, how did this whole Pooja Dhingra personal brand happen? And I was like, I don't even know that this is a brand. I'm going to ask you the same question,
I don't know why
Gauri.
you're bothering to ask me this.
I'm going to ask you the very same question, Gauri Devidayal.
Oh, God.
How did the brand Gauri Devidayal come to be?
What brand? No.
No, but on a more serious note, I know that when you started Misty, that's when you started a podcast and got bit by that bug, and then we can't leave the mic now. But it would be nice to know a little bit about that.
Talking.
It would be nice to know a little bit about that journey as well. And
I never thought of it as I'm going to go out there and build my personal brand. I think it's something that, you do what you do and people take from it what they take from it, and it sort of takes a life of its own. But even today, I'll say that I love doing the podcast. It's my getaway from work. Maybe I get away a bit too much from work now because of it. But it has taken a life of its own. Even what I put out on, I don't know, Instagram or like LinkedIn or wherever, I'm putting things out or like coming and sort of talking in different places. I just do it. I don't have an agenda with respect to personal brand. I think if you have something of value to share or say, sometimes I don't have anything of value to say, but I just say it anyway. Do it.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't realize, with the podcast, for example, like whatever, 2-3 years ago, in fact, it started in COVID, the second one. This round is on me, and people were like, what podcast? Like, who listens to this? What are you doing? Like, what are you wasting your time doing? And I was just like, I've got all the time in the world, like in COVID, and my potential guests have all the time in the world as
Yeah.
well. I'm just gonna do it because it's keeping me, sane, entertained, distracted, whatever you want to call it, and I'm having fun doing it, right? I didn't have any clue what impact it's gonna have or who's listening, what numbers I should be,
Same.
None of all of that. But it is clearly having some impact. I have people who, message or like they'll meet me and say, I remember once Jay and I were out somewhere and someone was like, oh my God, I love your podcast. And he just looked at her like, what kind of creature is this? but so that's the thing.
Yeah.
I think you just do, as long as you're sort of putting something that's worth
value.
listening to out in the world.
But I also think what really helps with is just representation.
Yeah.
Like I feel like when I started, there was such few women in the business in general. You could count them. Like even the decision to go to culinary school, you couldn't look at anybody and say that, oh, this is what a future in this business could be like. It was always only men, and I think that as much as I think that you have to kind of speak louder and be present and be like, without that may not be the agenda, but the impact that it actually has on a whole generation of women who then look at you and say that, oh, I can do this and this is an option.
Yeah.
I think that's what's really great about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I don't know what people take from what you're doing, but if you do it with some kind of sincerity and you feel like you have something to share, put it out there. And that's what personal brand is.
I saw a post you did the other day about mom guilt. And do you still feel that? You started the business when Dia was still...
No, she wasn't born.
She wasn't born.
Yeah, she was born 2 years.
2 years into
later.
it.
Yeah.
What is the process? What has the process been like for you, dealing with juggling all those different hats? Now you have another one added to the mix.
Not another baby. No, it's I've talked about this a lot that I struggled a lot in the beginning, where I remember even the nursery school she went to said that, you should be home when the child comes home. And I was like, well, how do you expect me to do that? And, even family was like, oh, can't you work part-time? And I was like, I don't work for someone. I work for myself. And this isn't, so it was a big guilt that actually because you don't know otherwise, right? So you're like hearing all these people from people you respect, you look up to, you seek their advice for most other things, and then you hear this, so then you question yourself. I don't know when it happened, but at one point it just snapped in my head where I was like, I'm not the first working mother. I think I'll figure this out like we do everything in life, right? Whether it's business, marriage, whatever, you'll figure it out. And there will be times when you get it wrong. But I'm not listening to all this noise around me. I genuinely believe that it'll be okay.
Yeah.
And so that's how I'm going to do it, right? And there are times when you'll hear like a little pitter patter of stuff, but you really again have to come back and be like, you know what? I know I'm putting my best foot forward. I know the kid is generally like okay. And you just go with your gut, you can't, like with anything, right? It's not just about being a mom. It's like even on business, you might hear like 10 people giving you gyan. You might hear, you just be like, hey, I'm going to do what I feel like.
And okay, my last two questions. If you had to give advice to someone young who's entering the F&B industry today, what would you tell them?
I would say that, a lot of what we've talked about, right? Like in terms of the sort of the practical part, which is have the backup funds for longer than you think, budget more than you think you're going to, even when you do your business plan, like maybe do 1.5x because there'll be 100 things you don't anticipate. All those things, having the right partner if there is a partner, etc. But most importantly, you've got to believe in what you're doing. And a lot of people do a product because so you might see an opportunity and you fill a gap, you're solving a problem. But given in F&B particularly how much it takes from you in terms of time and energy, especially when you're setting something up, it has to be something that you really love. I mean, I know in your case, you eat, sleep, and breathe what you do.
And still it's challenging.
No, but imagine if it was something then that you didn't sort of necessarily, you weren't a consumer of your own product and you're having to spend like all your waking hours doing it. It's going to be a challenge, trust me, and that sort of passion that you feel for what you do, it comes across to people, right? It will, like, you may not be out there screaming it from a loudspeaker, but it will come across. And that's actually what goes into making a great experience.
And what will see you through when things get really tough as well.
And, I think that's the thing that and also, like I said earlier, patience. It's not an easy ride. It's something that there's no sort of quick money from this. There's no money in it.
It's like, why do you want to do this
again? Let alone quick or slow. But it's a great business to be in.
But I think the patience one is key, because I feel like everyone wants results overnight, especially now with the world that we live in and everything happens so fast. Everyone's like, I want to open a bakery and I want to be successful and I want to do this. I said, I've been doing it 13 years. Like it takes time. It takes time to do it.
And also, like, when you have investors, sometimes there's a lot of pressure. And I know you have investors, but we had, great investors supporting us through Misty. And the pressure is self-imposed. So, just also be mindful when you're taking on other people's money, if you're starting something out, because they might be absolutely wonderful in terms of being supportive, and but there is a lot of responsibility that comes with that. So,
That was a good one. That I'm going to take that for myself as well. So what's new, Gauri? What's happening? What are you excited about? Tell us.
Oh, well, the book came out. No. So I have written a book with a friend, a co-author, the person who actually can write. So I had the stories. He could write, Vishwas Kulkarni, a really dear friend. And I had this crazy idea in June, July 2019, when we knew like the table's 10-year anniversary was coming up in Jan 2020, and we were like, it's 10 years, we've got to do something big. And obviously, like, I would not know where to start with a cookbook. So I was like, oh, let's write a book, but all I can write are like stories. And I thought, oh, we'll just like pull this off in like 6 months.
So cool. What is it called?
It's called Diamonds for Breakfast.
Oh.
Yeah. And you are the first to know, by the way.
That's amazing. But by the time this episode is out, everyone would have read it.
I know. Well, hopefully.
So it's fiction inspired. It's no names.
There are names. It's non-fiction. I'm probably going to get sued.
Oh my God.
I know.
Okay, so then that is going to become a show and that's going to become a movie.
No.
And that's,
oh God.
Look at me, I'm like taken off.
Okay, so let's take that dream question again. I'm kidding.
No. But that's great. Congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm looking forward to all the good feedback on it. But yeah, putting it out there. And obviously it didn't happen in 6 months. It's happened in 3 years later, 3.5 years later. But
congratulations. That's big news. And thank you so much. I'm sure people that are listening in have got a lot of value from everything that you had to say. I know I have. Thank you so much for giving me the time.
Thank you.
Bye. I hope you liked that episode. Tell me what you thought about it in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel. For audio episodes, subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.